The heat at Fort Henson was merciless, the kind that turned the horizon into a shimmering blur and the ground into burning glass. The desert wind swept through the base, carrying with it the smell of oil, sand, and gunpowder. Trucks rumbled past rows of barracks, dust clouding the air. It was the kind of place that tested people, not just physically, but mentally. And that morning, it was about to test someone new. Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell stepped down from the transport truck with a duffel slung over her shoulder. She was small in frame compared to the soldiers around her, but her presence made a quiet impact. Her posture was straight, her eyes focused, green and sharp like glass under sunlight. She didn't look around in awe or hesitation. She just stood still for a second, breathing in the dry desert air as if preparing for battle. Around her, murmurs started. Another one from HQ? Looks soft. Bet she won't make it to the end of the month. The voices weren't loud, but they didn't need to be. Sarah could hear the weight behind each word. She'd heard it before, in training, in deployment prep, even in classrooms. It was always the same tone, disbelief disguised as casual talk. She didn't respond. She simply adjusted the strap of her rifle and walked toward the command post, her boots crunching over gravel. Inside, the air was cooler but not friendlier. Captain Doyle, a tall, broad-shouldered officer with sun-scorched skin and a square jaw, looked up from his clipboard. His gray eyes narrowed as he scanned her uniform. Everything about her was regulation perfect. Not a wrinkle, not a misplaced patch. And that irritated him. "You're Mitchell?" he asked, voice low and unimpressed. "Yes, sir," she replied, standing at attention. Her voice was calm, even controlled, not the nervous tone he expected. He circled her slowly, like an instructor inspecting a cadet on day one. "They said you topped your class in tactical response. Scored 98 in precision marksmanship." "Yes, sir." He chuckled without humor. "Let's hope the desert doesn't melt those numbers. We've seen a lot of top-of-the-class types fall apart when the sand starts biting." Sarah didn't move. "Understood, sir." Doyle leaned closer, his voice dropping. "You'll be assigned to Echo Unit. Full contact drills, live simulations, night runs. No special treatment. You fall behind, they'll leave you behind. We don't slow down for anyone, especially not for someone trying to prove a point." Her jaw tightened slightly, the only sign she'd even heard the jab. "I'm not here to prove a point, Captain. I'm here to serve." Doyle studied her for a moment, then gave a dismissive nod. "We'll see." The barracks smelled of metal polish, sweat, and old wood. Sarah's bunk was near the door, a spot usually given to new arrivals. Across from her sat Corporal Jennings, tall, cocky, with a grin that seemed glued to his face. He leaned back on his bed, tossing a baseball in one hand. "Well, look what the storm blew in," he said. "You the new poster girl?" Sarah dropped her duffel onto the floor and began unpacking her gear. "I'm your new teammate." He smirked. "We'll see how long that lasts. Don't worry, we'll try not to shoot too close to your manicure." Laughter rippled through the room. Sarah didn't respond. She neatly folded her uniform, placed her boots by the bed, and turned toward him with calm eyes. "Good, because if you miss, I won't." For a moment, the laughter froze. Jennings' smirk faltered, then returned, a little thinner. "Feisty. I like that." That afternoon, the squad assembled on the training field, under a sun that felt like a furnace. Captain Doyle stood in front, his voice booming across the sand. "Welcome to Fort Henson, where comfort dies and soldiers are born. Out here, we train like it's war, because one day, it will be. You'll sweat, bleed, and curse me. But if you survive this, you'll be proud to call yourself part of this base." He paused, his eyes landing on Sarah. And for those of you who think this place plays favorites, think again. No one gets a free pass. Not even the Army's latest experiment. Laughter broke out again. Sarah kept her gaze forward, expression steady. First drill, endurance run. 5 miles, full gear, move. The first step felt like running through fire. The sand gave way under their boots, every stride heavier than the last. Soldiers cursed under their breath as the heat pressed down like an invisible weight. Sarah ran quietly, her breath short and measured. Jennings and the others pushed ahead, determined not to let her outpace them. Halfway through, sweat dripped into her eyes. Her backpack straps dug into her shoulders. A voice beside her, Private Cole, grunted, "You can slow down. No one's watching." She didn't answer. She focused on the horizon, the flagpole at the far end of the range. Step by step, she closed the distance. When others began to fall back, she didn't stop. When her calves screamed, she pushed harder. By the time she crossed the finish line, her uniform was soaked, her boots caked in sand, but her face still calm. Captain Doyle checked his watch, frowning. "Not bad, Mitchell." Jennings stumbled in moments later, gasping for air. She cut corners. "Negative," Doyle said, looking at the GPS tracker. She ran clean. 3rd fastest time of the group. The squad went silent. Jennings looked away. Sarah just nodded slightly. "Permission to hydrate, sir?" "Granted," Doyle muttered. But his eyes followed her as she walked to the water tank, quietly impressed, though he'd never admit it. That night, the mess hall buzzed with noise. Soldiers swapped jokes, traded stories. Sarah sat alone at the far table, polishing her rifle piece by piece. The metal gleamed under the flickering lights. A group nearby started whispering. "Did you see her today?" "Yeah, freak pace for a newbie. She'll burn out soon." "They all do." Sarah caught fragments, but ignored them. She'd learned long ago that silence was louder than defense. Captain Doyle entered, walking straight to her table. "Mitchell." She looked up instantly. "Sir?" He eyed the disassembled rifle in front of her. "You keep that thing cleaner than my office." "Rifle's the only friend that won't talk back, sir." He smirked despite himself. "Tomorrow, 0600, marksmanship trial. Let's see if your file's as accurate as your running time." She reassembled the weapon, locked the magazine, and placed it beside her. "I'll be ready." Outside, the desert night had turned sharp and cold. Stars stretched endlessly overhead, the same stars that hung above every battlefield she dreamed of, and everyone she feared she might face. She sat quietly by the barrack steps, listening to the wind. In the reflection of the rifle barrel, she saw her own eyes staring back, tired, determined. "They think I can't handle combat," she whispered to herself, the wind stealing the words. Good, let them think that. Behind her, inside the barracks, laughter echoed again, Jennings bragging, others mocking. But Sarah didn't move. She tightened her boots, adjusted her jacket, and stared out into the endless dark. Tomorrow would bring more heat, more doubt, more tests. And she would meet every one of them the same way she'd met this day. Quietly, steadily, unbreakably. The sun rose over Fort Henson like a relentless judge, casting long shadows over the barracks and training fields. Sarah Mitchell woke before the first call of reveille, the sound of her boots against the wooden floor sharp and steady. She checked her gear, rifle, ammo, radio, every piece exactly where it belonged. Precision wasn't pride. It was survival. And she knew that at Fort Henson, survival wasn't optional. By the time the squad assembled for morning drills, the heat had begun its daily assault, baking the desert sand and turning the base into a furnace. Captain Doyle stood at the center of the field, arms crossed, watching the soldiers like a hawk. His gray eyes shifted towards Sarah as she stepped into line, unflinching, her uniform spotless despite the early morning dust. "Today," Doyle announced, voice echoing over the field, "we'll push endurance, marksmanship, and tactical awareness, all under stress. Those who fail will fall behind. Those who fall behind will regret it." He let the words hang, cold as the desert floor. Sarah took a deep breath. Every day at Fort Henson was a test, but today felt different. Today, she would feel the weight of their doubt, the whispers, the sideways glances, the heavy judgment in every movement of the men around her. The first drill was a timed obstacle course, designed to push soldiers to their limits. Barbed wire, walls, mud pits, simulated explosions. Each station was meant to break bodies and minds. Sarah hit the first wall running, vaulting over it in a smooth, practiced motion. She landed, dust kicking up, and immediately ducked under barbed wire, crawling faster than anyone expected. A group of men behind her whispered, barely audible, "Slowpoke? Let's see how long she lasts. Pretty sure she's going to cry halfway." She heard them. The words were sharp, like knives trying to cut her confidence. But she didn't respond. She didn't need to. Each movement was her response, steady, precise, unstoppable. When she reached the mud pit, a soldier called out, "Careful, rookie. Don't get stuck." She gave a faint smile as she plunged forward, arms churning through thick mud, refusing to falter. By the time she emerged, other soldiers were struggling to keep up. A few glances were thrown her way. Shock, irritation, disbelief. "Luck," muttered one. "Just beginner's luck." Sarah ignored them. Luck had nothing to do with it. Discipline did. Focus did. Grit did. And she had all three in abundance. After the obstacle course, the squad moved to marksmanship training. Rifles in hand, targets set at 300 meters. The men took aim, pulling the triggers with force, bullets echoing across the desert. Sarah took a moment to calibrate, checking the wind, the sun's glare, the weight of the rifle. Click, her first shot landed dead center. Click, bullseye. Click, another perfect hit. The instructor squinted. "Mitchell, that's unusual." Jennings muttered under his breath. "Beginner's luck? I bet." But it wasn't luck. Every hit was the result of countless hours of training, of conditioning her mind to move slower than the chaos around her. By the end of the session, Sarah had scored highest in the squad, a fact that made some men glare and others murmur nervously. Doyle noted it silently in his clipboard, his expression unreadable. Sarah, unbothered, reassembled her rifle and checked her ammo quietly. There was no celebration, no boast, only the calm assurance of someone who knew her worth. The afternoon brought simulated tactical maneuvers. Teams were tasked with infiltrating a mock enemy camp under timed conditions. Sarah's squad included Jennings, whose smirk had grown into a thin line of skepticism, and several others who doubted her capacity to lead under pressure. "Don't trip us up," one joked, elbowing her lightly. "I won't," she said simply, eyes scanning the terrain. The drill began, and chaos erupted immediately. Explosions boomed, dust rose in clouds, and soldiers shouted over the comms. Most of the men rushed forward, trying to impress each other with speed. Sarah, however, moved cautiously, scanning, analyzing, positioning herself with precision. Her calmness in the storm drew attention, some uneasy, some grudgingly impressed. Midway through the exercise, Jennings ran ahead recklessly, triggering a mock alarm. Soldiers froze, unsure how to react. Sarah's voice cut through the chaos. "Left flank, cover. Smoke up." Her instructions were clear, concise, unhesitating. Within moments, she had redirected the squad, avoided casualties, and completed the objective with efficiency. Jennings stumbled beside her, breathing heavily. How did you? Focus, she said simply. Just focus. By evening, the men were exhausted, drenched in sweat, and mentally drained. But even in fatigue, their whispers followed her. She's too precise. It's creepy, quiet, but damn, she doesn't miss. I don't trust it. She's different. Sarah had heard these words before, over the years. Differences were feared. Strength in unexpected places invited skepticism. But she had long ago learned that proving oneself wasn't about convincing others. It was about surviving and excelling regardless. Later, in the barracks, she prepared for the next day. Water, gear, uniform, rifle, all arranged meticulously. A knock on the door interrupted her routine. Roommate, a voice said. It was Private Cole, hesitant. I didn't mean what I said earlier. About the rifle. Sarah looked up, expression neutral. Words are cheap, she said. Actions aren't. He nodded, a little ashamed. I get it. That was all she said. She returned to her gear, methodical, calm. The day had tested her body, but the whispers and doubt were tests of a different kind, and she knew she had already passed them in ways no one could see. Night fell over Fort Henson. Stars blanketed the sky, a stark contrast to the desert's scorching sun. Sarah sat outside on the edge of the training field, rifle resting across her knees, dust settling around her. She could hear distant laughter from the mess hall, and somewhere in the shadows, someone muttered, "We'll see how long she lasts." She closed her eyes for a moment, breathing in the crisp desert air. The heat, the dust, the doubt, all of it was fuel. Every whisper, every smirk, every underestimation sharpened her resolve. They think I can't handle combat, she whispered to herself. The wind carried the words away, as though the desert itself was listening. Good. Let them think that. Seconds will tell the truth. A faint smile touched her lips. Not because she was confident, though she was, but because she knew that the moment of doubt for everyone else would soon collide with the moment of truth. And Sarah Mitchell had always been ready for truth. The desert sun climbed high, turning Fort Henson's training grounds into a furnace again. Today's challenge was not endurance or marksmanship. It was a tactical field exercise, a test of strategy, instincts, and split-second decision-making. Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell stood in line with her squad, listening to Captain Doyle's brief. His tone was sharp, clipped. No smiles today, only expectation, pressure, and skepticism. You'll be divided into pairs, Doyle barked. Teams must infiltrate the mock enemy camp, retrieve intelligence, and return undetected. Time is critical. Mistakes are deadly in the field. Treat it like the real thing, because one day it might be. Sarah's pulse quickened slightly, but only in awareness. She had trained for this. She had dreamed of scenarios like this. She had imagined herself in the chaos before, only now she would live it. Her partner was Corporal Jennings, the man who had mocked her on arrival, the man who still couldn't conceal disbelief in her ability. Try not to slow me down, rookie, he said with a smirk, adjusting his rifle. I won't, Sarah replied simply, eyes scanning the terrain. There was no fear. There was no arrogance. Just the calm calculation of someone who knew every detail mattered. The field was a labyrinth of dunes, rocks, and abandoned training vehicles. Smoke grenades marked the enemy positions, and the sound of simulated gunfire echoed through the desert. Move! Doyle's voice cut across the field. Jennings bolted forward, his rifle at the ready, adrenaline firing through his veins. Sarah followed at a measured pace, scanning the area. Unlike him, she did not rush blindly. She noticed patterns, the way smoke moved with the wind, the small shadows that betrayed hidden positions, the uneven terrain that could betray a stumble. "Wait," she hissed. Jennings glanced back, impatience written on his face. "What?" "Move," he snapped. "Check your flank. Step there, no, step there. Cover your blind spot." Jennings rolled his eyes but obeyed, and Sarah watched as a nearby simulation mortar exploded exactly where she had warned him. Dust and debris flew into the air, startling the squad and nearly knocking Jennings off balance. "See?" she said, moving forward smoothly. "Not luck." Inside the enemy compound, things escalated. The simulation was supposed to be controlled, predictable, but one of the smoke grenades had shifted, confusing the squad. A mock alarm blared, and some soldiers froze, unsure where to go. Jennings panicked, rushing toward what he thought was an exit. Sarah grabbed his arm, dragging him behind cover. "Stop, listen, move with me, or we'll get tagged out." Her voice was firm, unyielding, commanding. Something shifted in Jennings' eyes, disbelief, irritation, and then reluctant trust. The chaos was immense. Gunfire cracking, explosions echoing, dust stinging eyes, men shouting over the coms. But Sarah's movements were precise, measured, efficient. She directed the squad step by step. Left flank. Check cover. Move slowly. Smoke here. Go low. Eyes up. Rookie Cole, I've got you. Follow my shadow. By the time they reached the retrieval point, every step had been guided, every risk mitigated. She retrieved the intelligence cache, secured it, and immediately plotted the route back, anticipating every hazard. The return journey tested her patience even further. Jennings and the other soldiers were exhausted, sweat mixing with sand, boots skidding on loose terrain. One rookie tripped over debris, sprawling across the sand. Sarah was instantly at his side, dragging him behind a rock for cover, all while scanning the area for threats. "Thanks," he gasped. "Move," she said, voice calm. No praise, no lecture, just action. Even Jennings, who had been mocking her all morning, now followed her silently. He didn't speak. He just did. The pride that had fueled his arrogance was replaced by grudging acknowledgement of skill, a skill that wasn't flashy but deadly effective. The squad emerged from the simulated battlefield unscathed, an achievement few would have predicted. Captain Doyle and the other instructors watched from a distance, binoculars trained on the scene. He lowered them, his expression unreadable. "Damn," muttered one instructor. "She's not just surviving, she's leading." Back at the assembly point, the squad gathered, sweating, bruised, but alive. Doyle approached, eyes narrowing. "Mitchell, that was unusual. You kept composure, directed your squad, and completed the mission with 0 casualties. Explain." Sarah met his gaze, her green eyes steady. "I read the field. I anticipated their patterns, and I moved as one step ahead." Jennings, still catching his breath, muttered, I never thought." He trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Words failed him. She had done what he couldn't even imagine, lead under chaos. Doyle studied her silently, his jaw tight. For the first time, he couldn't find a flaw to critique. He scribbled in his notebook anyway, more out of habit than purpose. The squad remained quiet, a mixture of awe and unsettled respect filling the air. Some men shifted uncomfortably, others glanced at her with newfound admiration, and a few just shook their heads, still unwilling to admit the truth aloud. That evening, in the barracks, the air was thick with exhaustion and whispered analysis. She's different," one muttered. "She's too calm, too precise. Unfair advantage," another grumbled. Jennings sat across from her, looking at his food without touching it. After a long pause, he finally spoke. "I didn't expect that. You? You actually saved us back there." Sarah didn't smile, didn't brag. She simply placed her rifle in its rack, tightened her boots, and said, "I told you, focus. That's all it takes." He blinked, unprepared for humility wrapped in competence. "Yeah, well, I guess I've got a lot to learn." She nodded. "We all do." Later, Sarah sat outside, alone, gazing at the desert horizon. The wind was cooler now, carrying away the dust and sweat of the day. She could hear laughter from the mess hall, men recounting the day's drills. She knew some of it was envy, some disbelief. She welcomed it. Every doubting voice was fuel. Every mocking comment sharpened her edge. "They don't see it yet," she whispered to herself. "But they will. Every second of doubt will meet its consequence soon enough." Her hands rested on her rifle, warm but trusted. Her mind replayed every movement from the day, the tripping rookies, the shifted smoke, Jennings panicking, the simulated mortar. She analyzed each error, each success, each split-second decision. It wasn't arrogance. It was preparation. It was instinct honed by hours of discipline and focus. Sarah knew one thing with certainty. Fort Henson would test her again, and next time, the stakes would be even higher. And when that moment came, everyone would see exactly what she was capable of. The desert was quiet now, but tomorrow would roar louder than any noise today. And Sarah Mitchell would be ready. By the fourth day at Fort Henson, the desert seemed to press down even harder. The sun was relentless, the wind whipping sand across the base, and tensions among the soldiers simmered like a slow-burning fuse. Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell had already proven herself in endurance runs, marksmanship, and tactical drills. But success had a cost: envy and resentment. Inside the barracks, whispers started to escalate. A group of soldiers gathered near the mess hall, their voices low, eyes darting toward Sarah's bunk. "She's outperformed half the unit already," one muttered. "Yeah, but she's too perfect. Makes the rest of us look like amateurs. She's quiet. That's what worries me. You never know what she's thinking." Another grinned darkly. "I say we shake things up a bit. See if she cracks under pressure." Sarah, of course, heard none of this. She had learned early in life that those who spoke behind your back gave themselves away. She didn't need to engage in their games. Every whispered word, every jealous glance, was fuel for her focus. The morning drill began with a leave fire simulation. Soldiers were paired randomly to navigate a field strewn with obstacles, smoke grenades, and mechanical targets. Sarah's pairings were strategic. She ended up with Private Cole, the rookie she had helped before, and Corporal Jennings, whose skepticism was growing thin. The day started normally, but as the squad moved forward, Sarah noticed something unusual: a small adjustment to her rifle scope. The tension in the pit of her stomach told her someone had tampered with it. A brief inspection confirmed her suspicion. Screws had been loosened. "Accidents happen," she murmured to herself. Her voice was quiet, but her eyes were sharp as a hawk. She didn't confront anyone immediately. The drill had already started, and her priority was survival and success. The first targets appeared, automated pop-ups across the dusty terrain. Sarah took aim, but the loosened scope caused her shots to scatter. She hit a few targets, but not all. Laughter erupted from a nearby group of soldiers. "Nice shooting, rookie," Jennings called sarcastically. "Need a pointer?" Sarah ignored them. She adjusted her scope, calibrated her stance, and breathed slowly, methodically. Her training kicked in: sight alignment, trigger control, breath control. The next round of shots landed perfectly. Bullseye after bullseye. The mocking laughter faded into silence. Captain Doyle, observing from the command tower, narrowed his eyes. Something was happening. She had recovered instantly. But the question remained, was this skill or luck? As the squad advanced into the field's central area, an unexpected problem arose. Smoke grenades shifted with the wind, reducing visibility, and a mechanical enemy turret activated prematurely. The rookies panicked, stumbling in confusion. Jennings froze for a moment, glancing at Sarah. "Lead us," he muttered reluctantly, a rare admission of trust. Sarah's voice cut through the chaos. "Cole, left flank. Cover. Jennings, move with me. Watch your step." Step by step, she guided them. Smoke, noise, and heat assaulted their senses, but her calm, precise instructions kept the team alive. By the end of the exercise, the squad had completed their objectives with minimal errors, but the atmosphere was tense. Some soldiers were awed. Others simmered with frustration. Back at the barracks, things escalated. One soldier, bitter and defiant, had deliberately loosened Sarah's equipment, hoping to make her fail. But she had corrected the sabotage without drawing attention, completing the task flawlessly. The instigator, Private Daniels, lingered near her bunk that night, whispering under his breath, "No one outshines me. Not some quiet girl." Sarah didn't respond. Instead, she focused on her own preparation, checking her rifle, cleaning her gear, and laying out supplies for the next day. Her silence was louder than any confrontation. The whispers grew among the ranks. "She's untouchable. Perfect. Too perfect. Something's off. I don't trust it." And that, Sarah knew, was exactly where she wanted them, distracted by envy while she prepared to excel. The next morning, Doyle announced a field tactical simulation designed to push soldiers to exhaustion. The squad would navigate a mock battlefield under strict time constraints, encountering both simulated enemy fire and unexpected obstacles. Sarah's instincts told her that today would be more than just a drill. She observed her squad carefully. Jennings, though less vocal, was still skeptical. Daniels, the one who had sabotaged her, seemed openly hostile. The rookies were nervous, adrenaline already high. "Stay sharp," she whispered to Cole. "We move as one. Trust me." Cole nodded, relief and trust in equal measure. The simulation began. Explosions cracked across the field. Automated gunfire added chaos, and smoke obscured every path. Soldiers scrambled, some panicking, others moving blindly. Sarah's calm presence acted as an anchor. She guided Cole, shielded rookies, and intercepted missteps from Jennings. Every command was precise, clear, and urgent. Her quiet leadership contrasted sharply with the chaos around her, and slowly the squad began to follow her instinctively. Even Jennings couldn't ignore it. Midway through the drill, Doyle activated a sudden twist. A live fire system misfired slightly, sending rounds dangerously close to the soldiers. Panic erupted. Many froze, unsure where to run. But Sarah's voice rose above the chaos. "Follow my shadow. Move low. Cover. Step where I step." She shielded Cole, pulled a rookie behind cover, and led Jennings along a safer path. Every step was calculated. Every command executed with clarity. The simulated battlefield became her stage, and she moved like a conductor guiding an orchestra through disaster. By the time the system stabilized, the squad had emerged unscathed. Breathing heavily, exhausted, the soldiers stared at her, finally realizing that this quiet, unassuming recruit had just saved them, not with bravado, but with skill, discipline, and calm command. Back at the barracks, the aftermath of the day left tension simmering. Some soldiers grudgingly admitted admiration. Others plotted subtle ways to undermine her. Daniels, his pride wounded, muttered to Jennings, "We'll see if luck lasts." Everyone has a breaking point. Jennings remained quiet, conflicted. He had witnessed her instinctive leadership under pressure. She wasn't lucky. She wasn't fragile. She was something else entirely. Calm, precise, and terrifyingly competent. Sarah, meanwhile, sat alone outside, the desert stretching endlessly before her. The stars blinked faintly in the clear night sky, a stark contrast to the fiery sun of the day. She checked her rifle again, methodically cleaning it, aligning every sight, oiling every mechanism. "They think I can't handle it," she whispered to herself. "Let them test me. Let them doubt me. Seconds will prove the truth." Her resolve was unshakable. The tension on base, the whispers, the sabotage attempts, none of it mattered. They would learn, eventually, that strength doesn't announce itself. It proves itself in action, in precision, in moments where everything else falls apart. Tonight, the desert was quiet. Tomorrow, it would roar. And Sarah Mitchell would meet it head-on. The morning sun burned hot over Fort Henson, as if the desert itself was warning the soldiers that today would test them beyond endurance. Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell had already proved herself in drills, tactical exercises, and marksmanship. But today's challenge was designed to simulate live-fire combat, a final culmination of weeks of training. Captain Doyle's voice carried across the base as he gave the orders. Today's exercise will mimic a real engagement. Enemy fire will be simulated. You will coordinate, communicate, and survive. Failure is not an option. Treat this as reality. Sarah listened carefully, absorbing every word, every subtle cue in the briefing. Her squad gathered around her. Jennings, still skeptical, but quieter now. Cole, nervous but attentive. And the other soldiers, tense under the weight of expectation. As they prepared, Sarah's mind went over every step, positioning, cover, communication, escape routes. She was calm, her body steady, every motion precise. The others noticed it, some grudgingly, some with unease. "Move!" Doyle commanded, and chaos erupted. The squad moved across the simulated battlefield, weaving through sand dunes and abandoned vehicles. Smoke grenades created patches of disorienting fog, while automated turrets fired harmless rounds with deafening noise. Soldiers shouted directions, but panic began to ripple through the ranks. Sarah noticed it immediately. Cole froze, uncertain which path to take. Jennings rushed ahead recklessly, bullets clipping sand around him. A rookie tripped and fell into a crater, crying out as simulated fire approached. Sarah's voice cut through the chaos, calm but commanding. "Cole, left flank. Move with me. Step where I step. Jennings, cover the rear." Her instructions were precise. Her movements were deliberate. Even under stress, her body reacted instinctively, dragging the fallen rookie behind cover, directing others to positions that minimized exposure, scanning for threats faster than anyone else. By the midpoint of the course, something unexpected happened. A system malfunction. A section of the automated turrets began firing live rounds instead of simulated ammunition. Bullets tore through the sand, striking dangerously close to soldiers. The simulated exercise had turned into real danger. Chaos erupted instantly. Soldiers screamed, ducked, froze. Captain Doyle's voice, normally commanding, sounded frantic over the comms. "Everyone, retreat to safe zone. Move, move." Many didn't move. Panic had taken hold. Some froze in place, unable to calculate even the simplest escape. Jennings hesitated, glancing at Sarah. Without a second thought, Sarah ran forward, pulling him behind a mound of sand. She grabbed a rookie by the arm and dragged him into the shallow cover of a crater. Her rifle was ready, eyes scanning for danger, but not firing. She prioritized survival. "Follow my lead. Keep low. Move east now." Her commands were short, precise, and instantly obeyed. Even soldiers who had doubted her instinctively followed, her calm authority cutting through fear like a blade. The bullets whistled dangerously close, sand exploding around them. A round grazed Sarah's shoulder, tearing through fabric and skin. She felt the sting but didn't flinch. Pain was a distraction she couldn't afford. Every step, every movement was calculated. She dragged a fellow soldier behind a boulder, shouting, "Cover your head. Watch your step. Don't stop moving." Jennings, normally brash and confident, moved silently behind her, finally realizing that she wasn't just surviving the chaos, she was controlling it. Sarah signaled Cole to provide covering smoke with a grenade. The cloud enveloped the group, giving them the visual cover needed to advance across open ground. Step by step, she guided them through the field, avoiding the rogue fire, keeping everyone alive. By the time they reached the center of the field, exhaustion weighed heavily on every soldier. Their clothes were soaked with sweat, sand coated every surface, and some were bleeding from minor cuts and scrapes. Sarah's shoulder ached, but her resolve was unbroken. She repositioned the team again, assessing the last stretch to safety. "Keep tight. Don't scatter. I'll take point," she shouted, leaving them with a fluid, unshakable rhythm. Her voice was the anchor in a storm of terror. A final round of fire erupted nearby. One rookie faltered, stumbling over loose sand. Sarah caught him mid-fall, dragging him into cover and adjusting his stance to minimize exposure. Cole's hands shook, but she guided him, whispering instructions that cut fear down to precision. By the time the last soldier crossed the safe zone boundary, the live fire system had been shut down. The desert fell silent, leaving only the sound of labored breathing, whimpering, and the wind sweeping across sand dunes. Captain Doyle and the instructors arrived at the scene, their expressions a mixture of shock, awe, and disbelief. Soldiers who had doubted Sarah stared at her in silence, some unable to speak, others too shaken to move. Jennings finally spoke, his voice barely audible. You led us through that?" Sarah stood upright, dust coating her uniform, blood streaked across her shoulder, hair plastered to her forehead, but eyes calm and clear. "We moved together," she said simply. No pride, no dramatics, just truth. Cole, still trembling, whispered, I didn't think anyone could." "You can," Sarah replied quietly. "When you focus, you survive. That's all there is." Even Captain Doyle, normally terse and unflappable, had no words. His eyes swept over the exhausted squad, then landed on her. For the first time, he was truly silent, watching as a soldier, a recruit no one expected, had taken control in a situation that could have been disastrous. Later, in the barracks, the atmosphere was heavy. Soldiers huddled in small groups, recounting the day's chaos in whispers. She saved us," one muttered, disbelief heavy in his tone. "Unbelievable," said another. "She moved like she'd been through this before." "I thought I was prepared," Jennings admitted quietly. I wasn't ready for that." Nobody was. Sarah, alone at her bunk, cleaned her rifle slowly, methodically, ignoring the whispers. Pain throbbed in her shoulder, but she treated it like a minor inconvenience. Her mind replayed every moment, every movement, every decision, every command. Nothing was left to chance. Nothing was forgotten. "They doubted me," she whispered into the quiet room. "Let them doubt. Seconds will tell the truth." The day ended with an unspoken acknowledgement. Soldiers who had mocked her, doubted her, or plotted against her now regarded her differently. Fear, respect, and awe mingled in their eyes. Even Jennings, once her loudest critic, approached silently and offered a nod of respect, an unspoken apology. Sarah didn't respond. She knew actions mattered more than words. She had proven it once again. Skill, focus, and courage were stronger than mockery, whispers, or envy. That night, as she sat outside under the desert stars, Sarah felt a quiet sense of triumph, but not for herself. She felt it for her team, for the rookies who had survived because of her calm in the storm. And deep down, she knew this was only the beginning. The desert was alive with danger, and Fort Henson had yet to throw its worst at her. But one thing was certain. When it came, Sarah Mitchell would be ready. The following morning at Fort Henson began in eerie silence. No one joked at breakfast, no one traded stories. The cafeteria buzzed only with hushed voices and glances toward Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell. The day before, she had led her squad through what should have been a controlled simulation, one that turned into a live-fire nightmare. The official report called it a technical malfunction. But everyone on base knew the truth ran deeper. Some suspected sabotage. Others whispered about Sarah, calling her the calm in the storm. Captain Doyle sat at the head of the mess hall, coffee in hand, eyes narrowed. He had been in dozens of combat zones, but what he'd seen yesterday, the sheer control, precision, and fearlessness in Sarah's movements, haunted him. There was something unsettlingly professional about the way she handled chaos. She wasn't just trained, she was built for it. "Mitchell," he called across the room. The clatter of utensils stopped. "Briefing room, now." Sarah rose without a word. Her uniform was still worn, her shoulder bandaged neatly. No dramatics, no questions. She followed. Inside the small, dim-lit briefing room, Doyle leaned against the table, studying her. "You realize that wasn't a drill anymore," he said slowly. "You could have been killed out there." "Yes, sir," she replied. Her tone was steady, almost serene. "You didn't freeze. You didn't panic. You commanded." "I followed the objective," she corrected gently. "Keep everyone alive." Doyle exhaled. "You did more than that. You kept a dozen soldiers from tearing each other apart. That takes more than instinct. Where did you learn that kind of composure?" Sarah's eyes flickered, a brief moment of something unspoken. "Field experience, sir. Before assignment." He studied her face. There were stories buried there, years of training, maybe loss. He decided not to push further. "You'll lead again," he said finally. "Same squad. We need to finish what we started. But this time, no simulations. You'll be overseeing a live navigation under actual fire. Helicopter support, armored recon, desert breach. You'll be the acting lead." Sarah nodded once. "Understood." As she turned to leave, Doyle called after her. "Mitchell, the men will follow you. Make sure they come back in one piece." "I intend to, sir." By noon, the desert was roaring with engines. The squad was geared up, vehicles fueled, and communications live. Sarah stood beside her team, Jennings, Cole, and 3 others. The rookies looked pale. Some still hadn't recovered from yesterday's terror. Jennings strapped his vest tighter, eyes on her. "You sure about this, Lieutenant? We barely survived yesterday." Sarah glanced at him, her expression calm. "Yesterday, we reacted. Today, we control." Jennings smirked faintly. "You talk like you've done this 1,000 times." "Maybe I have," she replied quietly. Cole, the youngest of the group, whispered to her as they mounted the truck. "Ma'am, do you think it'll happen again? The live rounds?" Sarah checked her rifle, loading it with calm precision. "If it does, we won't run from it this time." The convoy rolled into the training zone, an expanse of rock, sand, and steel wreckage designed to mimic a war-torn landscape. But something about the air felt wrong. The silence before engagement was too heavy. Mitchell took command, confirmed simulation settings, she said into her radio. Static. No response. Command, this is Mitchell Squad. Confirm communication link. More static. Jennings frowned. Comes a fried again? Sarah's instincts screamed. The same kind of malfunction that led to yesterday's chaos. She didn't wait. Everyone out. Defensive formation now. The soldiers moved instantly, her authority no longer questioned. Moments later, the sound of real gunfire shattered the stillness. It came from the ridge, sharp, echoing cracks. The squad dove for cover. Bullets kicked up dirt around them. Someone screamed as a round tore through a nearby crate. Those aren't blanks. Cole yelled, panic creeping in. I know, Sarah snapped. Positions. North Ridge, 2 shooters minimum. Cole, smoke. Jennings, 12 o'clock suppressive fire. She didn't hesitate. Moving through cover, she scanned the horizon, her body low, eyes locked. She spotted the glint of a rifle scope on a dune to 300 meters out. She raised her weapon, exhaled slowly, and fired 3 controlled bursts. The glint disappeared. Jennings watched, stunned. How the hell did you? Eyes on your sector, she cut him off. We're not out of it yet. The squad huddled behind a burned-out jeep. Radio static hissed in their ears. No contact with command, no intel, no support. It was just them in the open desert. Ma'am, Cole said shakily, if this isn't a drill, who's shooting at us? Sarah scanned the terrain, voice steady. Could be a rogue system or a misfire. Doesn't matter. We treat it like combat. Jennings reloaded, his hands shaking slightly. You're telling me we're fighting actual rounds and command doesn't even know? Then we make sure they find out, Sarah replied. She crawled to the edge of their cover, retrieved a flare gun, and fired it high. The red trail streaked against the bright sky, a universal signal for distress. Then, with chilling calm, she gave her next order. We're moving east. 50 meters between each man. Stay low, eyes open, and if I say down, you hit the ground. Got it? Every soldier nodded. The movement was slow, deliberate. The wind carried their breath away. The heat blurred their vision. Every few seconds, another shot rang out, not from simulation turrets, but real rifles. Sarah counted the patterns. 3-second delay between bursts. They're testing distance, she murmured. Whoever's behind this knows what they're doing. Jennings gave her a wary glance. You talk like a sniper. Sarah's eyes stayed forward. I talk like someone who's been shot at before. They reached a stretch of rocky cover, regrouping behind a rusted supply truck. The firing paused for a brief, unnatural silence. Sarah knew what that meant. Ambush incoming, she whispered. Positions now. The next volley came from the opposite direction. A pincer attack. 2 soldiers screamed as rounds ricocheted off the metal. Sarah moved like lightning. She grabbed a smoke grenade, yanked the pin, and threw it wide, creating a dense gray wall. Through the haze, she fired controlled bursts, hitting targets no one else could even see. On me, she shouted, charging forward. Her voice had changed, no longer calm and measured. It was fierce, commanding, alive. The squad followed without question. By the time the last shot was fired, the attackers, whoever they were, had vanished. Dust settled. The only sound was wind and the distant hum of engines from returning vehicles. Captain Doyle arrived minutes later in a jeep, face ashen. What the hell happened out here? Sarah stood tall, her uniform streaked with dirt and blood, rifle slung over her shoulder. Unidentified live fire engagement. Multiple shooters. We held position and neutralized the threat. You neutralized? He stopped himself, staring at the calm in her eyes. How many casualties? None, sir. All accounted for. Doyle's jaw tightened. You're telling me you led a counteroffensive in a live ambush without command contact? Yes, sir, she said simply. He stared at her for a long moment, then muttered under his breath, Hell, you're something else. Back on base, medics patched wounds while the soldiers sat in stunned silence. Jennings approached Sarah slowly, removing his helmet. You saved us again, he said quietly. That wasn't luck. Sarah met his eyes. No, that was training. He shook his head. No, that was leadership. Sarah didn't respond. She looked out over the desert, endless, silent, and cruelly beautiful. The same place that had tried to break her had instead revealed her. And somewhere deep inside, she knew the truth Doyle was beginning to suspect. This wasn't the first time she'd faced real combat. But for now, she stayed silent, because her actions had already spoken louder than words ever could. Morning broke over Fort Henson in amber light. The desert was calm again, but the base was anything but. Word had already spread how Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell had taken command in a live ambush, how she'd moved her squad through real bullets and brought every soldier back breathing. Rumors ran faster than truth ever could. Some said she'd served in Black Ops units. Others swore she'd been Special Forces before being reassigned under a fake record. The mess hall buzzed with the same name over and over, Mitchell. When Sarah entered for breakfast, conversation stopped. Forks froze halfway to mouths. The same men who had once laughed at her now stepped aside to make space. She said nothing, just nodded politely and poured herself black coffee. Her calm was disarming. The air seemed to bend around her silence. A summons by mid-morning, a runner arrived. Captain Doyle wants you in command immediately. Sarah followed through sun-drenched corridors until the concrete gave way to the cool dark of the briefing room. Doyle stood beside the base commander, Colonel Hayes, both watching a projection on the wall. It was drone footage from the ambush. On the screen, Sarah's small figure darted through smoke, dragging a wounded soldier to cover, signaling, firing in controlled bursts. Every movement was methodical, almost surgical. Hayes paused the video at the frame, where she turned back into gunfire to pull another recruit behind the jeep. Right there, he said quietly. She disobeyed the retreat order to save 2 men. Doyle's tone was softer than usual. Sir, she didn't hesitate once. Hayes turned toward her. Where did you learn that level of control, Lieutenant? Sarah met his gaze evenly. Experience, sir. What kind of experience? With respect, sir, she replied. The kind that teaches you people matter more than protocol. The colonel studied her for a long moment, then gave a slight nod. You kept 12 soldiers alive. The board will convene tomorrow to review commendations. Sir, permission to return to my unit? Granted, Lieutenant. And Mitchell? Hayes' expression softened. Fort Henson hasn't seen leadership like that in a long time. The silence before applause outside. The sun was unforgiving again. Sarah walked past the shooting range where recruits were training. The same instructor who had once smirked at her luck now straightened when he saw her. Ma'am, he said, almost shyly, range is yours if you need it. She shook her head. They need it more. Then, watching a young private fumble with his rifle, she added, Mind if I show him something? Within minutes, she was teaching half the line how to steady breath and control recoil. Her instructions were crisp, patient. Don't fight the weapon, she told them. Guide it. It wants to be steady if you let it. The group listened like schoolchildren, hanging on every word. Captain Doyle watched from a distance, arms folded. Each correction she gave was perfect. Each demonstration flawless. He realized what the rest of them were finally seeing. This wasn't luck, gender, or mystery. It was mastery. The ceremony the next afternoon, the entire base assembled on the parade ground. The air shimmered with heat. Flags hung limp in the stillness. Sarah stood at attention in front of the formation, her uniform freshly pressed, bandage hidden beneath the sleeve. Behind her stood the soldiers of Delta Company, including Jennings and Cole. Colonel Hayes stepped up to the microphone. 2 days ago, during what should have been a controlled training exercise, a systems failure turned simulation into live combat. Amid confusion, one officer assumed command, executed a defensive maneuver, and ensured 0 fatalities. He paused, letting the words sink in. That officer is Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell. Applause rippled through the formation, hesitant at first, then louder. The colonel continued. Her composure and tactical judgment reflect the highest standards of military leadership. Therefore, I am awarding her the Bronze Star for valor in the line of duty. Doyle stepped forward, pinning the medal to her chest. For a heartbeat, the desert wind picked up, fluttering the flag overhead. Cameras clicked. Sarah's expression didn't change, but inside she felt something tighten relief, maybe pride, though she'd never admit it. When Doyle saluted her, it wasn't ceremony, it was respect. She returned it sharply. Then, one by one, every soldier in Delta Company followed. Rows of salutes rippled down the line until even the maintenance crew outside the hangar stood still, hands to brows. For the first time since arriving at Fort Henson, Sarah felt seen not as the quiet outsider, but as part of them. Aftermath. That evening, celebration spread through the base. The mess hall buzzed again, but this time the laughter was genuine. Jennings raised a mug toward her across the room. To the woman who made us all look like amateurs. He called. The room erupted in cheers. Sarah shook her head, smiling faintly. To the team, she said. No one makes it alone. Cole leaned closer. Ma'am, do you ever get nervous? Always, she said. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's acting while it's there. Jennings whistled. That's going on the barracks wall. Even Captain Doyle laughed quietly from his corner. The tension that had gripped Fort Henson for weeks finally eased. For the first time, the base felt united under the example of a soldier they'd all underestimated. A quiet moment later that night, Sarah walked alone to the edge of the compound. The desert stretched endlessly before her, glowing silver under moonlight. She sat on a low dune, helmet beside her, and breathed in the dry air. She thought about the names of those she'd led, the faces she'd kept alive. Leadership wasn't glory, it was burden. Every decision weighed heavy, even when the outcome was right. Footsteps crunched behind her. Captain Doyle approached, hands in pockets. You did good work today, he said. Thank you, sir. You know, I looked into your record again, he continued. There are gaps. Classified missions. You served before, didn't you? Real combat. Sarah didn't look at him. Some experiences don't fit on paper. He nodded slowly. Fair enough. Just don't disappear on us when the next crisis hits. I'm not going anywhere, sir. He smiled faintly. Good, because this base finally has someone worth following. As he turned back toward the compound, Sarah looked up at the stars. The metal on her chest caught the faintest shimmer of light. It wasn't about recognition. It was about what came next. Tomorrow, new recruits would arrive, eyes bright, eager to prove themselves. She'd be there to train them, to show them that strength wasn't noise or bravado. It was calm, discipline, and the courage to stand steady when everyone else ran. Legacy in motion. By dawn, the story of Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell had already traveled beyond Fort Henson. Other bases were talking, other commanders requesting transcripts of her after-action reports. Somewhere, policymakers would read about the officer who turned chaos into command. But on the ground, Sarah just laced her boots and prepared for the morning run. The desert wind met her like an old adversary, fierce but familiar. She ran steady, eyes forward, breathing even. Behind her, a few younger soldiers followed, struggling to keep pace, but determined not to fall behind. She didn't tell them to hurry. She simply kept running. Leadership, she believed, wasn't about shouting orders. It was about moving first and letting others choose to follow. And they did. A week had passed since the ceremony, yet the echoes of that day still lingered around Fort Henson. Everywhere Sarah Mitchell went, the salute followed. It wasn't forced or ceremonial anymore. It was instinctive, respectful, earned. The same soldiers who once looked past her now stood taller when she entered a room. They didn't see a woman trying to prove herself. They saw a leader who already had. But Sarah wasn't the type to bask in recognition. After the applause faded and the reporters left, she was back in uniform at dawn, running drills with the new recruits. The desert wind carried the same scent of dust and diesel. Only now, the base felt different, alive, alert, as if the ground itself remembered the fire she had lit. The next generation, it began with small things, new recruits, watching her more closely during training, mimicking her posture, her calm breathing at the firing range. She taught them that accuracy wasn't about aggression, but rhythm. Listen to your heartbeat, she told them, crouched beside a nervous private whose hands trembled on the trigger. Every second one is a shot waiting to happen. Don't force it, wait for it. The rifle cracked, and the bullet struck dead center. The boy blinked, stunned. How'd you do that, ma'am? Sarah smiled faintly. I didn't. You did. You just needed to trust the quiet. Within days, that phrase spread across the barracks. Trust the quiet. It became the unofficial motto of Delta Company, painted in chalk over the door of the training hall. Even Captain Doyle noticed the shift. The recruits were more focused, more patient, more deliberate. Fort Henson, once known for recklessness and rivalry, was becoming something else, a place of precision and calm under fire. And it all started with one lieutenant who refused to raise her voice. Recognition beyond the wire. 2 weeks later, Sarah received an unexpected call to the main office. Colonel Haas stood beside a visiting officer, a general from the Pentagon. His uniform was crisp, his medals glinting under fluorescent light. Lieutenant Mitchell, he began, extending a hand. General Lawson, I've read your report. Impressive work at Henson. Thank you, sir. The department's interested in applying your methods. Controlled response training. Real-time decision-making. You turned a failed simulation into an instructional breakthrough. Sarah frowned slightly. It wasn't a breakthrough, sir. It was survival. Exactly, Lawson said. And we want you to teach it. We're assembling a leadership and tactical training program in Virginia. You'd oversee field operations. Doyle, standing nearby, gave a small smile. Sounds like you're being promoted, Lieutenant. Sarah hesitated. She looked out the office window, where her soldiers were drilling in the dust, their movements sharp, their coordination tight. They still need me here, she said. Hayes stepped forward. You've done your part here. The best leaders don't stay. They grow others and move on. Lawson nodded. The offer stands? The nation could use your perspective. Sarah didn't answer right away. She saluted, turned on her heel, and left quietly. Decisions like this weren't made in rooms. They were made in silence, with the hum of the wind in your ears and the weight of responsibility on your shoulders. Night before departure, that night, she stood outside the barracks, watching the desert stars burn cold and bright. Jennings and Cole joined her, both looking uneasy. Ma'am, Jennings said, scratching the back of his neck, rumor is you're leaving? Sarah nodded slightly. Orders came down this afternoon. I'll be heading east in 2 days. Cole sighed. It won't be the same without you. Sarah looked at them, 2 soldiers who'd once doubted her, now standing like brothers beside her. "That's the point," she said. "It shouldn't be the same. It should be better." Jennings tried to laugh, but his voice cracked. "They'll probably name the training field after you. Then make sure no one forgets how to use it," she said with a small smile. Before heading in, she added quietly, "You two were the first to follow me. Don't ever think I forgot that." Departure. The morning of her transfer arrived with a thin veil of mist over the base. The convoy truck waited near the airstrip, engine humming. Sarah's duffel bag was light, just a few essentials, her notebook, and the bronze star she hadn't yet learned to care for. The soldiers of Delta Company lined up along the tarmac. It wasn't an order, they'd come voluntarily. No speeches, no brass band, just silent respect. As Sarah approached, one by one, they raised their hands in salute. Jennings stepped forward, voice steady. "Permission to speak freely, ma'am?" "Always." He took a breath. "When you first got here, we thought you'd never last a week. But you taught us something we didn't even know we were missing. You taught us control." Sarah nodded, emotion tightening her throat. "You taught me trust." Cole held up a small plaque. Hand-carved, rough but beautiful. It read, "Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell, the quiet that led us." Sarah's jaw tightened. She didn't cry. She never did. But she held the plaque like something sacred. "Keep the noise down while I'm gone," she said softly. The men laughed. The convoy door shut. The engine roared to life. And as the truck rolled away, dust swirling in its wake, the soldiers remained standing until the desert swallowed the last glimpse of her. A new battlefield, weeks later, in a government training facility outside Arlington. Sarah Mitchell's name appeared on a doorplate. Director, Advanced Tactical Leadership Program. Inside the glass-walled building, groups of young officers gathered daily, learning from her curriculum stress response drills, ethics under fire, calm decision-making. Most had heard the story of Fort Henson, though few believed it entirely. The idea that one lieutenant could command chaos into order sounded like legend. But when Sarah stepped into the classroom, her presence silenced doubt. Her voice was low but steady, her words deliberate. "Leadership isn't shouting louder than fear," she told them. "It's listening harder than panic." Every trainee took notes. Every one of them believed. She never mentioned her medal. She never told them about the night she crawled through gunfire to save strangers. She only spoke about principles, discipline, clarity, and compassion. Because to her, those were the true weapons of war. Echoes months later, Fort Henson hosted a new intake. Jennings was now a senior sergeant. Cole handled tactical instruction. Over the range gates, freshly repainted, stood their motto in bold letters, "Trust the quiet." Occasionally, mail would arrive from Virginia, simple postcards signed SM, no words. Just coordinates or short notes, like "keep them steady." The soldiers would pin them on the bulletin board, like trophies. Sometimes, late at night, when the desert wind carried distant thunder, Jennings swore he could still hear her voice in the static of the radios. "Hold your line. Breathe." Whether real or imagined, it always steadied them. The legend a year later, a journalist wrote a feature titled, "The Lieutenant Who Changed the Way We Train." It spread through military circles, then across the nation. They called her the calm in the storm, the silent commander, the soldier who redefined courage. But Sarah never gave interviews. She turned down invitations, declined book deals, and ignored social media requests. When asked why, she only said, "Real stories don't need authors. They live in those who keep them going." At the Pentagon, her methods became standard curriculum. New cadets practiced her breathing drills before live exercises. Her name became part of official doctrine, Mitchell's response principle. And still, somewhere in the Virginia dawn, Sarah would rise early, lace her boots, and run. Alone, steady, silent, just as she always had. Epilogue: a quiet after the storm years later, at a memorial ceremony for veterans, a young female cadet approached an older officer on stage. "Sir," she said shyly, "is it true there was a woman at Fort Henson who saved an entire unit during a live fire accident?" The officer smiled knowingly. "It's true, but she wouldn't want you to remember her for that." "Then how should I remember her, sir?" He looked toward the sky, where a hawk circled high above the flagpole. "Remember her as proof that calm can be stronger than chaos." And somewhere far away, a woman in a faded uniform watched the same sky, her lips curving into a quiet smile. She had never needed the world to believe in her, only to remember what belief itself could do.